The clock just sped up dramatically on the Indiana Fever, and not in a good way. What you just heard changes everything about their championship timeline, because the latest CBA proposal includes a clause that nobody saw coming, one that could force the Fever to make impossible decisions about their core trio much sooner than anyone expected. Let's break down what just happened. Under the new proposal, rookie contract players who make first or second team All-WNBA become max eligible in their fourth year. That means Aaliyah Boston becomes max eligible in 2026, next year, and Caitlin Clark becomes max eligible in 2027. The Fever thought they had 2 more years of Caitlin on a rookie deal and 1 more year of AB before these decisions hit. They were wrong. Here's why this matters so much. The Fever exercised Aaliyah Boston's 4th-year option back in April 2025. Standard procedure at the time. But now, with this new CBA language, that 4th-year option might not matter at all if she's suddenly max eligible. And you better believe Aaliyah Boston is going to want that max contract immediately. We're talking about jumping from roughly $76,000 to over $1.3 million. Nobody turns that down. Now let's talk about the math, because this is where it gets brutal. The proposed salary cap for year 1 sits at $5.75 million. The max salary comes in at approximately $1.3 million. So if you've got 3 max players, that's close to $4 million of your $5.75 million cap. You'd have to fill out the rest of your entire roster with $1.75 million. And when the minimum salary is $230,000, you're looking at maybe 7 or 8 players total. It's not just difficult, it might be mathematically impossible. The consensus is becoming clear. 2 max contracts is the ceiling for WNBA teams under this new structure, not 3, which means the Fever are going to have to choose. And this isn't unique to Indiana. The Aces have multiple stars, the Liberty are stacked with talent. But the Fever's situation is particularly painful because they thought they had time. They thought they could keep Kelsey Mitchell, Caitlin Clark, and Aaliyah Boston together for at least 2 more seasons before these cap decisions became critical. That window just closed. Let's game this out. The core designation still exists in some form, though the league has signaled they're willing to modify it. Under current rules, Kelsey Mitchell is eligible to be cored for 1 more year. So theoretically, the Fever could bring back Kelsey on a supermax, give Aaliyah Boston a max contract, and keep Caitlin on her rookie deal for 1 more season. That's 2026. 3 stars, 1 year. Probably doable, if they make everyone else minimum salary players. But then comes 2027. Caitlin becomes max eligible. Aaliyah's already on a max, and Kelsey's core designation expires. Even if they somehow re-sign Kelsey to a longer deal during that 2026 season, you're still looking at potentially 3 max contracts trying to fit under a cap that only allows for 2. And we haven't even talked about Lexi Hull yet, or Nalissa Smith, or anyone else who might actually deserve real money for contributing to a championship contender. This is a good problem to have. Most teams would kill to have 3 players worthy of max contracts. Most franchises never get 1 player of Caitlin Clark's caliber in their entire existence. But it's still a problem, because the front office now has to make a decision that's going to define this franchise for the next decade. Do they try to squeeze 1 championship run out of all 3 stars in 2026, knowing it falls apart in 2027? Do they make a move now, trading Kelsey Mitchell while her value is sky high, to build around the Clark-Boston duo long-term? Do they gamble that the CBA changes again, or that the cap rises faster than expected? The Fever thought they were building a dynasty. They thought they had time to figure this out. They thought wrong. And the first major decision is coming this offseason with Kelsey Mitchell's free agency. Because whatever they decide about Kelsey sets the template for everything that follows. Here's what makes this so fascinating from a front office perspective. If you're Kelly Krauskopf and Lynn Dunn, you're looking at this proposal and realizing your entire strategic timeline just accelerated by 2 years. Every decision you were planning to make in 2027 or 2028 now has to be made in 2025 or 2026. The pressure to win immediately just increased exponentially. And think about what this means for Kelsey Mitchell specifically. She's been with this franchise through the terrible years. She carried them when nobody else could score. She finally gets a legitimate supporting cast with Clark and Boston, and now the team might have to choose between her and the 2 younger stars. If the Fever decide to core her for just 1 year, Mitchell knows exactly what that means. They're keeping her around for 1 more championship push, then letting her walk. That's not a long-term commitment, that's a rental. The alternative is even more complicated. What if the Fever try to sign Kelsey to a longer deal right now, before Aaliyah's max kicks in? You'd have to convince Mitchell to take less than a supermax to make the money work. You'd have to sell her on the idea that slightly less money now means more years of contention with this core. But why would Kelsey take that deal when she knows Aaliyah's getting a full max next year and Caitlyn's getting a full max the year after? The optics alone would be terrible. This is where the core designation becomes so problematic. It was designed to help teams keep their stars, but in practice, it often creates resentment. The player gets forced to stay for 1 year at a predetermined salary, unable to test free agency, while the team gets to delay the inevitable. And everyone knows it's just delaying the inevitable. The Fever could core Kelsey for 2026, but then what? She's gone in 2027 anyway, right when Caitlyn becomes max eligible, and the math becomes impossible. Let's talk about Aaliyah Boston for a second, because her situation is particularly interesting. She made second-team All-WNBA in her rookie season. She's been exactly what the Fever hoped she'd be, a dominant two-way center who can anchor a defense and create easy buckets in the paint. Under the old system, she'd be on her rookie deal through 2027. Under this new proposal, she's max eligible in 2026. That's a difference of over $1 million per year. The Fever can't say no to that, and Aaliyah's agent would be malpractice-level negligent to not demand it. But here's where it gets even more complex. What if Aaliyah doesn't want the max if it means breaking up the core? What if she's willing to take slightly less to keep all three together? That sounds noble, but it sets a dangerous precedent, because then Caitlyn would be expected to do the same thing a year later. And suddenly you've got the two best young players in the league taking discounts to make the math work, while veterans around the league are getting full max contracts. The Players Association would lose their minds. The broader implication here is that the WNBA's new CBA might accidentally prevent super teams from forming, which, depending on your perspective, is either great for competitive balance or terrible for star player empowerment. The NBA has dealt with this for years. You can have 2 max players and a solid supporting cast, or you can have 3 max players and a bunch of minimum salary guys who get exploited in the playoffs. The WNBA is now facing that same structural limitation, but with a much smaller cap and much less room for error. Think about what this means for the Fever's championship window. They made the playoffs in 2024. They've got a legitimate star in Caitlin Clark, who's only going to get better. They've got Aaliyah Boston developing into one of the best bigs in the league. They've got Kelsey Mitchell providing veteran scoring. On paper, this team should be a contender for the next 5 to 7 years, but the cap structure might only give them 1 or 2 real shots before the core breaks up, and that's assuming everything goes right. What if someone gets injured? What if the supporting cast isn't good enough because they're all minimum salary players? What if Lexi Hull or Nalissa Smith develop into players who deserve significant money, but the Fever can't afford to keep them? Every decision becomes a zero-sum game when you're capped out. The front office has to be incredibly strategic about this free agency period. If they core Kelsey Mitchell, they're committing to a win-now approach in 2026. If they let her walk or trade her, they're betting on the Clark-Boston duo being enough to contend while they build around them with cheaper pieces. If they somehow convince her to take a longer deal at less than max money, they're threading the needle and hoping the cap rises fast enough to make it work. My guess? The Fever try to core Kelsey for 1 more year. They go all in for 2026 with 3 stars, knowing it's probably their only chance to have all 3 together. They mortgage the depth of the roster, fill it with minimum contracts and young players, and hope that Clark-Boston Mitchell is enough firepower to overcome the lack of a bench. And then in 2027, they let Kelsey walk, give Caitlyn her max, and pivot to building around the Clark-Boston duo for the next decade. But that's a brutal decision to make, because Kelsey Mitchell deserves better than being the odd one out. She deserves a franchise that commits to her long-term. And if the Fever can't do that, some other team absolutely will. Which means Indiana might lose one of the best pure scorers in the league simply because the math doesn't work. So here's the question you need to answer in the comments. If you're running the Fever, what do? Do you core Kelsey for 1 year and go all in for 2026? Do you trade her now while her value is highest and commit to Clark and Boston long-term? Or do you try to convince her to take less money to keep everyone together? Because there's no perfect answer here. Every option has major downsides. And whatever the Fever decide this offseason is going to define this franchise for the next decade. Let me know what you do, and make sure you're subscribed because we're going to be tracking every move the Fever make this offseason.